And we're recording, I think. I don't know why this is so mysterious to me each time I do this, but I need to go to share screen and then go to sociality. There we go. All right, so for today, I'm going to try to fulfill my promise to you that we're not going to make 50-minute lectures every single time. Last two have been long. I'm going to try to make this one short, and we'll see how long that actually turns out to be. All right, so for today, we're going to go through common models of social evolution, and then a little bit of how we learn things about social evolution, the kinds of categorization of methodologies of learning new facts or inferences about the evolution of sociality. So first we'll go through some common categorization schemes of sociality. I'm going to go stop something. All right, well, that's fine. All right, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, so we'll go through common categorization schemes of sociality, and then we'll talk about the methods of testing hypotheses and our understanding of social evolution. All right, so the 4 or 5 categories of social structures that we're going to go over today are cooperative hunters, cooperative foragers, cooperative breeders, eusocial societies, and then anti-predator societies. So cooperative hunters are characterized by groups of predators that work in concert to subdue prey together. Normally they can access larger prey than any one singleton forager could obtain on its own. So by working in concert, they can bring down large, particularly profitable prey that would otherwise use their gigantism to avoid predation. They are more likely to defend their prey from interlopers. So like these hyena here are able, by working in concert as cooperative foragers, to defend carcasses from larger predators like lions. And so once they have subdued prey, they're able to prevent that prey from being bogarted by some other larger predator. Oftentimes they use unique techniques in their foraging. So I mentioned those orca whales using waving behavior to eat that poor crab-eater seal on an ice floe. Here is an orca whale spy hopping, where basically just pops out of the water just to see where the seal is on the ice floe. And then if that orca has other members of its pod around, it can use the coordinated movement of members of its pod to produce waves that cascade over the ice float and dislodge the crab-eater seal. But you know, things like ambushes and fatiguing prey and using collective endurance of a whole group rather than the endurance of just any one group member to fatigue their prey. These are options that just aren't accessible to singleton predators, but by working in concert, they're able to execute particularly profitable and useful techniques. Variance reducing. Now, it's really one of the most surprisingly, I guess at face value, it's surprising, benefits of living in a cooperative hunting society is that the odds of at least one member of your society or a small subcluster of your foraging society, your group, subduing some prey each day or each week or at each time step are greatly enhanced when you have lots of individuals out there. Every individual, if they're by themselves, would have a chance of having a bad day or a bad week in capturing prey. But if you have lots of individuals, the odds of having everyone in the group have a bad day is pretty low. So like odds are good that at least somebody is going to capture prey reasonably regularly in a larger group. And so even if you're not getting very much of that prey, that prevents you from, dying from starvation or freezing to death during cold nights. So you can produce enough energy to maintain your body heat. Or it's going to be more likely to prevent you from having something like a spontaneous abortion because you can't continue to provision offspring. Things like that. So by working in groups, although the average amount of food intake that individuals obtain per week might even be lower living in a cooperative hunting society, if the variance is tightened, then it prevents really bad days, bad weeks, bad months from happening to those hunters. And so like, it doesn't matter how great you were at hunting last month, if you have a bad month now, then it could spell your demise. So preventing that lower limit, that starvation limit, that spontaneous abortion limit, that hypothermia limit from occurring is a major benefit of living in a cooperative society that hunts. Cooperative foragers. A lot of those same advantages happen in cooperative foraging societies, but cooperative foraging societies don't necessarily have to be hunters. They could be looking for seeds, they could be looking for garbage, they could be looking for krill, whatever. So they are basically societies that are working in concert to find patchy resources that are hard to identify as a singleton. So the food that you want is out there somewhere. Finding it is a challenge, but when you find it, it's going to be so intense. There's so much of it that it doesn't matter if other individuals join you once you find it. So you might say, for instance, find a seasonal emergence of insects as a bat. And it's so much food that you couldn't possibly eat it all on your own. And so lots of other members of your society might join you in acquiring that resource. And there's no reason to defend it because there's just so much in terms of caloric resources that it doesn't cost you anything for them to be there. Then those resources tend to be ephemeral as well. So they're here today, gone tomorrow. So again, it doesn't really pay to defend those resources from other members of your group because tomorrow that food's going to be gone. And importantly, that ephemerality is important because it also means the new location of where that food might be isn't going to be here. It could be anywhere. And so even though you discover the food today, it's very likely that somebody else in your foraging society is going to discover the food tomorrow. So again, that has a variance reducing effect. It means that you have sort of basically many sensors floating around in the environment that can detect these intense resources. And they're basically indefensible because they're so large, they're so ephemeral, that it doesn't pay to defend them or it's impossible to defend them. And so you localize in on those patches. Birds at sea do this. They basically just pay attention to other members of their colony where they're swooping down or who's coming back with food very recently from a foraging foray. Other birds will notice who that individual is, will notice that they're diving, they'll notice they just came back with food. They'll then locate to wherever they have been or follow them on their next foraging trip and can localize in on things like schools of krill or schools of sardines or something that these birds can all exploit together. And things like piles of garbage. So two related hypotheses that are correlated with this cooperative foraging element is Zahavi's information hub hypothesis. So Aman Zahavi was an Israeli researcher who came up with a couple of famous behavioral ecology hypotheses, but the information hub hypothesis is that one reason why you would want to live in a society, in a group, is because you're going to exchange information at a hub and you're going to learn more about your environment. As a singleton individual, you by yourself, you can only understand a limited amount of the world as it's changing through time. You can only sample so much of it. You only have so much experience. But by living with a group at the end of the day, or on regular checks, you can go back to your group and socially acquire information about your environment, even though you didn't experience it yourself. So imagine you're one of these vultures here. These look like they're Egyptian vultures, but I don't know these facts. This is a vulture, but it looks like an Egyptian vulture. Anyway, so if we all go out foraging looking for carcasses, we're all vultures now. If we all go out foraging in the middle of the day to look for carcasses, and then we come back to roost at night, and I didn't find anything, but you're covered in rancid blood, guess who I'm following tomorrow to see where you got that food from? You, right? Or same thing could happen if we were all birds going out and foraging on these sardines, like those birds that I just depicted in the last slide. If you come back and you're vomiting up loads of partially liquefied sardines into your offspring's mouth, and I've come back penniless for my offspring, well, then I'm going to follow you tomorrow, aren't I? Or I'm going to follow you in 5 minutes when you leave to go get more sardines, and I'm going to learn more about my environment because of you. I mean, you could rightfully ask why it is some individuals just don't sit around all day and wait for successful individuals to come back. Actually, I don't know of anyone who's explored that sort of hypothesis, those freeloaders, but I guess it would be susceptible to cheating. And then the many sensors hypothesis. So again, one reason that you want to live in social groups is that you have many individuals sensing their environment, moving around through space and then sharing information, or that you're all generally in the same spot, but you're all trying to detect something that is hard to detect, and you have a chance of missing it. But if you've got a bunch of individuals, the odds that all of your passive perceptions are going to fail to identify that opportunity of food as you pass it goes down when you have more and more individuals in the group. So it might be a pretty good chance that one individual would miss it or 5 individuals would miss it. When you have 50 individuals flying by something that is semi-hard, semi-difficult to detect, the odds of at least some of the individuals detecting whatever it is, food or for that matter, predators, will go up. Cooperative breeders. Cooperative breeders are exactly what they sound like. There are one or a few breeders inside of a society, and then there are multiple non-reproductives that do not breed, although they might cheat and breed a little bit, but they generally don't breed. And they assist those dominant reproductive individuals in rearing offspring that are not their own, so that are not the helpers. So the helpers usually are assisting parents or semi-distant relatives in rearing brothers and sisters or cousins, but occasionally they're totally unrelated individuals and they're just there assisting because, well, maybe they'll hope one day that the dominant individuals die. And when they die, you might inherit this territory. Or maybe the non-reproductives stick around because there's nowhere else for them to go. And so they just sort of stick around, they help a little bit, and maybe they get a little slice of reproduction on the side without the dominant individuals knowing. So why do the helpers stay? Usually they're in a saturated environment where they really can't go anywhere else to go found their own reproductive unit. Oftentimes they're relatives, so they're assisting members of their own family reproduce, which inadvertently causes their genes that they share in common to be spread. And then oftentimes they're hoping that the progenitors, those reproductive individuals at the top of the society, will die one day, and hopefully soon, so that they can acquire all those resources and reproductive rights. So examples of that were like African cichlids that are evaluated in Sigal Balschein's lab, questions like this. Other famous examples include Florida scrub jays from Central Florida, which is a hot and inhospitable environment where every accessible piece of territory that can be occupied by a group of cooperative breeding scrub jays is occupied by a group of cooperative breeding scrub jays. Other examples include damselfish and meerkats. So meerkat societies are only a small number of individuals, usually a single female and multiple males that breed, and then all of the females are just helpers. If a helper attempts to acquire reproduction and mates with one of the males, then the dominant female usually basically harasses that female physically and aggresses her until she undergoes a spontaneous abortion and is ostracized from the group. Another famous example are damselfish that live together on coral heads. So these are Dacilus damselfish on these coral heads. That coral is a Poeciloptera, and so they all live inside of that coral head each night. During the day, they all swim out and they eat plankton out of the water column. If you frighten them, they'll all swim back into that coral head. So the important feature here is that only a limited subset of those individuals in that group, the largest individuals, are reproductive. Most of the small individuals are prevented from reproducing, and there may only be a small number, that may be 10% of the individuals or 5% of the individuals that are actually reproducing as females or males. I think also Dacilus are sequential hermaphrodites, but I can't remember if that's true or not. Anemone fish are sequential hermaphrodites. So anemone fish start off their lives as non-reproductive males. So there's something called protandrous. Then the largest individual inside of the society is a female who started off her life as a male. And the second largest individual inside of the anemone is a male, and it's the only reproductive male. So basically they live inside, all these anemone fish live inside of these anemones, and they spend almost all their lives as non-reproductive individuals that are proto-males. One day, as they ascend the ladder of life, they can become the only reproductive male inside of the society, provided they live long. And then the largest individual is a female. So when that largest individual finally dies, on that sweet, sweet day that they do, the second largest individual, who is a male, and the only reproductive male, will metamorphose into a female. And then the next largest individual, which was at that point a non-reproductive male, would undergo a hormone cascade and turn into the only reproductive male. So in that anemone filled with those clownfish, there's only one female and one reproductive male, and then everybody else is just waiting their turn. So why do helpers stay? Oh yeah, one other thing. Okay, the wasps. So many species of cooperative breeding wasps will co-found colonies together, and many females that are present at that co-founding event, which could all be queens at the beginning of the season, only one queen really reproduces a lot, and then all the other queens might occasionally lay an egg, but they're basically sterile helpers. Then they all help that head queen, the dominant queen, rear her offspring, who then become workers, who basically do much of the work that was formerly performed by those other non-reproductive queens. So there we are. Oftentimes these cooperative breeders live in highly saturated environments where it would be wonderful if they could go found their own reproductive group and find their own mates and secure their own resources, but the environment is so saturated that every spot that can be taken up is taken up. So they have to find some other lot in life to try to eke out fitness. Then they oftentimes live in an environment where it's very hard to colonize. So even if there were spots out there where these individuals could go try to found their own group, the odds of being successful are impossibly low. So they live in saturated environments, they live in really strenuous environments where it's difficult to found a society. Hierarchies for cooperative breeders are maintained via dominance. The only thing that prevents these subordinate queens from mating is the fact that this head queen just beat the crap out of them early on in the generation of this colony. The same thing is true with those meerkats. Like the only thing that prevents these subordinates from breeding is molestation by the dominant individuals. And then the risk of ostracism, right? If they cheat too much, the group might chase them out. There can be policing mechanisms. And then lastly, territories are often inherited. So if you stick around for long enough, then there's a good chance that the dominant individual will die, and it will be your day to ascend the ladder of life. One other thing, because that's true, because a lot of individuals inside these societies, their best chances at reproduction are just waiting around, oftentimes cooperative breeding species are longer lived than their solitary ancestors, because if the best chance in life that you ever have is inheriting a territory, then you better live a long, long time to make sure you have a chance of inheriting it for at least a little while. So like, clownfish can live to be 50 to 80 years old, but a comparable sized reef fish that's closely related that doesn't live in one of these queuing hierarchies in anemone might live 3 or 4 years or 2 years. Eusocial societies. So eusocial societies are like ants and some species of bees and some species of termites that have queens that are developmentally predetermined to become a queen based on the resources that they acquire early on in life, like royal jelly. Other individuals are sterile, so they, by the developmental environment that they're in, develop into individuals that will never be able to produce another female offspring. Sometimes they can produce male offspring, but usually they don't reproduce at all, and they spend their lives basically assisting a small number of queens inside their society who might live many decades. And although individual workers, like these ants, might live a year or two, the queens can live to be 10 to 50 years old. So what are eusocial societies like? They have obligate sterile helpers. So helpers that even if they fought to their heart's content, they would never be able to assume the role of a queen. They have division of labor, so the queens reproduce, the workers assist in doing non-reproductive tasks. Sometimes the division of labor is even finer than that, so there could be like soldiers and nurses, or majors and minors. But there's some developmentally determined strict separation of reproductive and non-reproductive castes. Those reproductives, those queens, might be one or a small number of queens inside the society. Some species have one queen, they are haplomatrotic, one queen, haplo, like haplotype in genetics. Anyway, it's one queen. And then pleiomatrotic means that the society has many queens. So haplomatrotic, one queen, pleiomatrotic, many queens, at least upon colony founding. And then many, many, many hundreds, thousands, sometimes millions of workers to assist those small number of queens, who basically, the queens turn into a conveyor belt of food. The workers vomit into the queen's mouth. She digests that. She then basically squeezes out eggs on the regular, usually every few minutes for the rest of her life. And the workers are the only things that ever see the light of day ever again. She's a queen, but basically she's a conveyor belt of babies who will have never seen the light of day ever again. have vomit distributed into her mouth, offspring that pop out of her backside, and eventually her legs will fall off and she won't even be able to walk, and the workers will drag her from chamber to chamber, wherever she needs to be to produce the offspring. So she's the queen, but it's not like she's got a great life. Anyway, queen is a weird word to use for her, but whatever, she's the queen. Anyway, so overlapping generations, this is important because many generations of workers will be able to take care of the generations before them. So queen generations and worker generations are on different scales. And the workers are assisting their mothers. So that overlap is important as well. So again, ants, some bees, some termites, a few aphids, some sponge-shelling shrimp, and then I guess naked mole rats also have something like this. Anti-predator societies, what do you think they live in social groups for? They live in social groups so that they can avoid their dangerous predators. So they have the many eyes hypothesis. So by having lots of individuals that can see, even cryptic predators that try to come find them, there's a pretty good shot that somebody in this anti-predator society will see them coming. Dilution effects. When that predator comes by, it's not going to be able to eat everybody. It's only going to be able to eat one of us or a few of us. So if we all huddle together, the odds that we're the one that's going to get picked off by this predator go down dramatically. If we're in a group of 10 million or a million sardines swimming around, right, that's not fair. A few thousand, 100,000 sardines swimming around and a seal comes by and can eat 5 of us, the odds of it being me, buddy, are real low. Same thing for you. But if it was just a few of us, there'd be a good chance that we would be the one that gets eaten. And then oddity effects. So oftentimes by living inside of these schools, if we look a lot like each other and we have the same kind of coloration, we can confuse predators and make it difficult for them to identify and pick out just one of us because we're all like this weird homogeneous blob that blurs and dazzles the predator, hypothetically. This makes individuals inside of these societies really, really alike. So morphologically, behaviorally, in terms of their coloration, because it means that it becomes this homogeneous blob. It's very difficult for the predators to be able to identify and navigate and track individual group members. If one or a few of us were some sort of weird color, like we're in a group of all silverfish and I'm pink, like my shirt today. Well, if I were the only pink individual, then it would be very easy for that predator to spot me. I would stand out in the crowd, and it would be much more likely that he or she, whatever the predator's sex or gender was, would come out and then try to capture me, right? So like they would notice me, they would be more likely to strike me. And this has been demonstrated all the time with experimental setups with like domesticated animals. The odd potential prey item oftentimes gets focused in on and disadvantaged. So it's in everyone's interest to be as homogeneous in appearance as possible inside of these anti-predator societies. The oddity effect. All right, so what kind of society is a society? Well, I mean, usually most animal societies provide a variety of benefits. There can be foraging benefits, but then there are also anti-predator benefits. There are anti-predator benefits, but then they help each other distribute information about the environment. It's difficult to categorize any one kind of species as being this kind of society and no others. But basically what you want to do is you want to figure out what is the primary mechanism for why these individuals cohabitate together now, and what was the likely evolutionary pressure, selective pressure, that favored them to create society to begin with, which might be different, right? The reason we evolved sociality might not be the mechanisms that maintain sociality today. Those advantages from yesterday might not be the advantages that we experience today. You would want to categorize the societies with both of those criteria in mind, and you would want to make it clear that you were categorizing them either by the selective pressures that you presume caused the evolution of sociality, or is currently maintaining it. There will always be some combination of different kinds of selective pressures, but alas, we usually categorize them in a relatively discrete framework. All right, let's see how much time that's actually been so far. That's been 25 minutes, and I've been giving you 50-minute lectures for several weeks in a row. So I'm going to actually end it there and then upload this. And I'll do another 25-minute or 30-minute lecture tomorrow. So we'll do 2 shorter lectures so that I don't waterboard you with too much content. Plus, I don't know what the acoustic environment is like in here right now, so it might be somewhat somewhat difficult to hear or annoying. There's a bunch of rustling things in my computer that's hissing because it's dying. Stop sharing and stop recording.